The world of VR is in kind of a strange place right now. It's been 5 years since the original Rift launched and almost 10 since the Kickstarter campaign, but nobody outside of enthusiasts have bought into it yet. The code of VR hasn't been cracked, that is, until Half-Life Alyx was announced.
Coming. You need to get out of here, now.
After an onslaught of spectacularly positive reviews, I got curious. I decided to splurge on an index. After all, I couldn't go anywhere in the real world, so why not try a virtual one? But after spending many hours with it, I came to the conclusion that VR simply doesn't work, and Half-Life Alyx showed me why not.
Place the key in the hole labeled Core Escape to complete Core Escape sequence. Or place the key. Good. And now we can tell you the purpose of this triple blind test.
Oh, good.
Discovering the value of friendship.
You have got to be kidding me.
Now, in order to elaborate on my tease, as per usual fashion, I'm gonna have to go back in time a little, so please excuse the contextual delay.
Easy money.
Easy money and Recco.
That's too far. Ah, yes, just perfect. When video games were first introduced in the late 50s to 70s, people didn't know what to expect from them. It was a new medium, an interactive way of experiencing a concept, if you will. Maybe not as groundbreaking, but as video games are very dear to my heart, no lesser than the introduction of film. You may have heard about one of the first movies ever shown, a short of a train pulling into the station, aptly named Arrival of a Train. This was in 1895, and when audiences experienced this for the first time, they were terrified. They couldn't grasp what they saw and confused reality with fabrication. Some even fled the theater, or at least that's how the story goes. If this reminds you a bit of your first VR experience, you're not alone. Your brain probably didn't know what to do with all the data it received. Back in 2016, the action of equipping unsuspecting test subjects with VR glasses became a popular pastime activity, although this time around, replacing the train with a roller coaster. Over the last decade, gaming has slowly but surely marched itself into the collective minds of the population. We all have come accustomed to the medium, and regardless of whether or not you play a lot or very little, you probably know what you're in for. Your brain knows what a video game is, just like you know what a movie is.
I know what that is!
Let me give you an example. Even in the most realistic games today, you will find boxes or crates or some other form of rectangular objects scattered around the game world. Did you ever wonder why that is? It's just about the easiest thing to render, and it fills up the space. So game designers and developers use it in abundance to create a more complete world. I don't know about you, but where I live, there are certainly no boxes on every street corner. But this is okay. Just like banner ads on websites, we have learned to ignore this deviation from reality. We are accepting it because it is part of video games. We expect it. There are other traits like the yellow markings in the Division 2 always showing where to go next, or more subtle hints like in the Uncharted franchise where the entire scene guides players into the right direction, just like how framing works in movies.
But it gives the frame depth, and there's always several layers of people to look at in the scene at any given time.
I'm sure you've encountered this and many other video game specific mechanics before. Sometimes it is noticeable, sometimes you never knew it was even there. But your brain did, and it reacted the way it was trained to, again, because it knows what a video game is. In situations where it's more obvious, you may have at some point uttered the phrase, "I think I have to go here." I encountered this a couple of months ago when I was playing with a friend of mine who didn't grow up with video games. He wasn't used to the mechanics and got lost, at which point I realized that finding out what to do next didn't make sense to him at all. I only knew because I've done it before, in other games. I'm gonna make another example from movies here. It's similar to when you see the plot twist coming from a mile away. You know it's coming because everything that led up to that point, well, points at the obvious conclusion.
Oh my god! I just want to borrow a cup of sugar! What a twist!
But in video games, this exists in parallel to the story. The mechanics themselves have these common patterns. And when somebody who's never played games does so for the first time, there's a lot of information that is expected to be common sense. What's the first thing you think of when you see boxes in video games? Probably there's loot inside. That's because we've been trained to expect this. We don't think about it. It's always been this way. There are games though that push these patterns to their extremes or play with our expectations. Those usually spawn a cult following and live on much longer after their initial story concludes.
Would you kindly get this? Would you kindly find that? Would you kindly find that? Would you kindly find it? Would you kindly get this? Would you kindly head to Ryan's office and kill the son of a bitch?
A wonderful example of this is Zelda's Breath of the Wild, a game that doesn't tell the players what to do next, but instead asks, what do you want to do next? These types of games are incredibly rewarding if you ask me. Nothing fills your brain with more endorphins than coming up with an idea that ultimately succeeds, making you believe that you are the sole perpetrator of the solution. You figured this out on your own, by using the tools that were available.
Who'd have thought wolves can be scared off by running at them with a giant skull? Actually, that does make sense.
To elaborate on my point here, in a lot of more traditional games, you sometimes are confronted with a problem, or let's say a boss battle. You can bet that there's probably going to be some sort of weak spot, maybe the legs or the eyes. Usually those points are highlighted, making sure that the player notices them. This isn't something bad. After all, this is a game, you want the players to succeed, but there are other ways to create a challenge. Half-Life 2 was the first game I played where I was confronted with a problem where the solution wasn't confined to the world in which I played. It went outside and asked, what would you do in real life to solve this? Now you may ask yourself, what's the difference between this and the spider legs? Aren't both of them problems that were designed? Well, yes, but the first one is a video game exclusive. You won't find any highlighted weak spots on a real tiger, and I'm pretty sure you can't kill it with 3 decisive strikes to the head. Okay, maybe 2. The second problem is a real-life problem. Instead of using video game logic, you are encouraged to think in real-world mechanics, thus pulling you in even deeper into the virtual realms, because just for a tiny little bit, you think of it less like a video game and connect it more to the real world. This opened a whole new perspective for me. I felt freed from traditional confinements and wondered, what else can I do? But games like these are far and few between. A lot of times, including Half-Life 2, a big portion of the rest is still restricted to traditional rules. Of course, there's nothing wrong with this. I absolutely love the Uncharted franchise and they are the pinnacle of scripted fun. Everything has to be done exactly the way the game was designed to be. And we are okay with this, because no matter how much experimentation and exploration the game gives us, we still know it's a game. The game knows it's a game, and it doesn't try to fool us. It wants to entertain us and, most importantly, give us a partial escape from reality. It can't entirely replace it, but VR can. Now, if you stuck around until here, first of all, thank you. You're probably wondering, wasn't I watching a VR video? Why is he blabbing about weak spots and plot twists?
I don't get it.
As mentioned, I've tried VR in the past, but I was never fully convinced. I always felt like every VR game was a bit gimmicky, like a demo or an unfinished idea. I wondered what was missing, and at first I thought it was the isolation, that VR could never make it because you can't share your experience. Normal video games are a social endeavor. But while playing through most of 2020, sitting alone in a dark room while eating a sandwich, I realized I don't want to share this with anybody. I could barely stand my own smell at that point, but I still loved it. When praises for Alyx started to rain in, my first reaction was, how did they solve the controls? Because playing other VR shooters, that was always the biggest gripe I had. And I thought Valve must have fixed this. I couldn't think of anything else that could turn the tides of VR. To my ignorant disappointment, I quickly learned that they didn't. In fact, they didn't change anything. They even included both the choice of teleporting and walking by the stick. So what exactly did they do to make Alyx the game changer everyone is calling it? Well, instead of creating a game and building a world around it, they've created a world and put a game in it. No matter how good the graphics get in any non-VR games, they are still games. We will always see them as such and perceive them so. But with VR, our perception of reality is exchanged. Much like the people in 1895 when they first saw the train entering the station. Just like them, we can't differentiate between what is real and what isn't. Even more so this time around. Because of the movement, the fact that our field of view is entirely replaced, we think it's real, even though we know it's not. And Half-Life Alyx is the only game so far that understands this. Sure, there are still very game-related mechanics in it, but if you've seen any video or review, it's most often about seemingly mundane things. More than any other game before it, just like Half-Life 2 17 years ago, it asks you, just do what you normally would do in real life. It's hard to explain the thrill, but simply being able to act out your initial thoughts creates an immersion that surpasses anything I've ever experienced before. There are many more details like these that make the world feel real, fleshed out, and while there's nothing groundbreaking when it comes to storytelling or gameplay, except for the fact that you can use the world to your advantage as you would expect from the real world, there are limits to how far you can go, but the immersion rarely breaks, and you'd be forgiven to completely forget about where you are. The line between virtual and real world is blurred, and in the end, that's the magic trick of Alyx. Valve didn't match our expectations of a game. They've matched our expectations of reality. But all of this comes with a heavy price tag. Creating a world requires enormous resources, something that is still incredibly difficult for now. We've come a long way since the first video games, and creating them, just like videos, photos, and any other content, has become increasingly accessible. This, however, this is an entirely new sector, and it will take time until this becomes an efficient practice. That's why I think VR, at least as it currently stands, is kind of going nowhere. Companies are trying to figure out how to use it, what's missing in the games, what can they do to make them not feel incomplete. The answer is the world. The games they've created feel like incomplete gimmicks because that's exactly what they are. You can't replace an entire reality with only a partial one. The goal of VR, at least from my point of view, is trying to replace our reality with a different one. But this can only be exchanged with something of equal value. If that can't be achieved, the immersion will break. And what good is a perfect world in which you can't do anything? Hey, thanks for watching, and hope you liked that overly dramatic ending. Anyway, see you again in the next one. Bye!